Hello, this is Matthias or CaptainGhostly from CosplayShop.be. Sometimes you need a helping hand to make your jewelry or glove armor, and today we are going to cast one. So to do this we will use a technique called live casting, and for live casting we will use Alginate. While Alginate and not just silicone is because this is skin safe, you don't need a mask, you don't need gloves, you don't need anything for this. After we've molded our body part in Alginate, we will use plaster to cast it. Now when this part is done, you can call it a day, but the problem is if you drop your plaster cast, then it's broken and you have to restart all over again. So what we are going to do is use silicone to mold the plaster cast. And then, when the mold is done, we will cast it in resin. This way we can always recast a new hand, or if you want multiple hands, we can just cast multiple ones. Make sure you are using cold water. Warm water will make the alginate cure faster. When using alginate, you have to be quick, so I poured it in and then got my hand in as soon as possible. After 10 to 15 minutes, it was dry and I could remove my hand. Once it's cured, I use plaster to fill it up. So, as you can see, all the fingers broke off. This is because we were a little bit too fast with unmolding. The plaster wasn't fully cured yet, so it was a little bit weak and it broke off. But it is not a big deal because we will only use this to make armor on or just sculpt some prosthetics. So we can just glue them on again. And anyway, we are going to cast this out of resin, so we have a much stronger object, because plaster, even though it's fully cured now, it's still kind of fragile. So we used some super glue to reattach all the fingers to the hand. As you can see, some of the seams are not really that clean. Again, it's not a huge deal because we will just use it to sculpt on. But just to make sure, I will add some epoxy sculpt so the seams will be fully filled. So now it's part to make a two-part mold. For making a two-part mold, we will need some clay, we will need some silicone, and I will make my mold from the mold base from some leftover scrap EVA foam. If we would pour the silicone in right now, then everything would leak out. So we have to make it waterproof. And to do this, we will use some good old hot glue. So what I'm doing now is adding clay at the border of the object, so we can have half of the object above the clay and half below the clay. So we are finally done making the clay part of the two-part mold. Normally you want a horizontal line, but because of the shape of the hand and because the plaster is really fragile, I've decided to have a little angle. Because I've put the clay at an angle, the seam won't be perfect. The seam will be all over the place, but that is okay because that's not the point of this mold. If you were, for example, molding a sword, then you want a seam at your cutting edge. To make sure the two halves of the molds fit together perfectly, we have to make some registration marks. I will use a simple pencil and push it in to make some holes. So one side will have the hole and the other side will have a bump. Just make sure you don't put them too close to the edge or the object. Okay, now we are going to pour the silicone into the mold. This is only the first part of the two parts. To mix the silicone, it is a 1:1 ratio, so it's really easy to mix. I'm going to use a scale just to be sure. And a little tip: to protect your scale, you can place it in a Ziploc bag. So if you spill anything, your scale will still be fine. Because of the weight of the silicone, the molds, like the walls of the mold, can start expanding. And to counter this, I'm going to glue this little piece of foam, which will reinforce the mold. Resin is very toxic, so be sure to protect your lungs and wear a respirator. The resin has a handy 1:1 ratio, just like the silicone. And now we wait an hour. So as you can see, we actually have quite a bit of flashing, but this is not a huge deal because we can just scrape it off. So this is the final cast I made out of resin. It's very strong and it's excellent for the uses I will use it for. Casting a hand out of resin and a two-part mold is pretty difficult. It's much easier to do like a dagger or a sword. But I think it's such a valuable item to have because now I can heat shape armor onto this hand instead of using my own hand and burning myself like all of the time. All the materials to make this you can find in the description below. They are from CosplayShop.be. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.